Hey everybody, welcome to the video. This one, lineup building for week 7 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. Go over a cash game and GPP strategy. Also, my core plays video posted later tonight if you do want to check that out. But if you find the specific video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Don't just cover NFL. We have NBA and NASCAR still going on. MLB is coming to a close, but spreadsheets, ownership projections, cheat sheets, optimizers for all sports, and a Discord community. Link can be found down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new signing over on PrizePicks, you get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100, so it's free money. Want to use it to your advantage when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think it'll be it for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And I don't think it needs to be said, but don't just copy and paste this lineup into all your contests because I do not pre-build these. I just build them together with you guys, going over my cash game process, and you can apply it to your own favorite plays. And plus, I'm sure there's plenty of news that will break, and I'll be updating my projections and all that stuff throughout the day on Sunday. So just keep in mind, this is no guarantee or even recommendation of a lineup I'm using, just showing you guys a process I use, and we see what fits at the end here. So as I always say in my cash game breakdowns, I like to start with the running back position over everything else, because those are the guys that are going to touch the ball the most in my lineup, and I want to make sure they're the guys I want. Sometimes wide receiver 3, tight end, or whatever it may be, I'll just throw whoever fits at the end. That is totally fine. But for the running backs, you want to make sure they're your guys. You don't get stuck with some random 4K running back that you hope gets on the field. Like wide receivers, sometimes that's okay, especially if it's your last spot and they're dirt cheap. But for the running backs, we got to make sure they are our guys. I think there's several tough decisions to be made this week because there's a lot of good mid-range running backs. But then we have Derrick Henry up top here at a massive price point, $9,200. And we also have these 3 really good spend-up wide receivers in Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp. So it's not just a easy decision of plugging in Derrick Henry moving on with your week. It's a great matchup versus KC, and we can't argue with the volume. I mean, he's going to get you probably around 30 total touches. He's been killing it this year, 50, 22, 28, 34, and 38. And I mean, all the touches in the world, over 100 rushing yards pretty much each and every single week, and so many rushing touchdowns. Also being used in the passing game this year on a 10% target share, which is about double what we usually see from Derrick Henry. So I would love to plug him in. This KC defense is not going to be able to stop Derrick Henry, and they use him no matter what the game script's looking like. If they're trailing, they use Henry. If it's neutral, they're using Henry. If they're leading, well, obviously, yeah, they're going to use a lot of Henry. So 4.5, 5-point spread here, the highest total in the week, 57 points. A lot of points should be scored here. 2 bad defenses, 2 pretty solid offenses. Obviously, the Chiefs have a great offense. It's just the Titans aren't like elite, but they can certainly score a lot of points. But I'm not sure we can afford Derrick Henry this week, to be honest. Like, if he fits at the end, yes, I feel great about him in the flex spot. And if you want to build on Henry this week, no problem with that whatsoever. It's just, it's kind of a tough week to afford these studs, I'm noticing. Like, even if we bypass Henry here and put a stud in the wide receiver position, it still doesn't feel that great all around. Like, the balanced lineups look pretty good, but, I mean, the studs are in such good spots, it's really hard to fade them. But for right now, for this lineup, the first guy we're going to plug in is Darrell Henderson, $6,600. Hard not to like him here. He's like a 15.5, 16-point favorite at home. Detroit is just awful versus the run. I believe they're 31st DVOA and obviously bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the position. And Darrell Henderson, he's getting the majority of the touches in this backfield. 21 carries last week, 78 yards, got into the end zone on the ground. Also had 3 targets, 2 catches, and a nice 25-yard touchdown up the seam. Good for 25 fantasy points, at least close to it. Hasn't really had a bad game this year, 15, 17, 16, 16, 24. This is positive game script. He's utilizing the passing game. He's going to get the majority of the touches. Great matchup, and he's a large home favorite. Like, there's nothing not to like about Darrell Henderson. He's too cheap at $6,600, so he's the guy we're going to plug in first, and I imagine he's going to be extremely chalky in this slate, but I think it's for a good reason. Now, the RB2, when you go this route instead of the Derrick Henry, like, you could use Darrell Henderson as your RB2 and Derrick Henry as your RB1, obviously, but if you go this route, I think your RB2 is a little confusing because there's a lot of good mid-range options to pick from. You have Leonard Fournette here, $6,400 in a good matchup versus Chicago. I mean, the Buccaneers are obviously large home favorites. He gets the majority of the touches, 22 carries last week and 6 targets, averaging 5 targets per game. Has a solid 12% target share, no AB, so there's more targets to go around. Had 30 fantasy points last week, 21 the week before that. Hard not to like Leonard Fournette at that $6,400 price point, being the RB1 on a very, very good offense. So he's obviously in consideration for me. Chuba Hubbard should get the majority of the touches here versus they have a terrible rush defense, 26 in points allowed per game to the running back position, and they're also 26 DVA versus the run. DeAndre Swift, I think, is a better tournament option, but with his involvement in the passing game gives him a pretty high floor each and every single week. You have Daryl Williams here, who I think is actually going to be the guy we plug in at $5,800 because I am planning on going Lamar Jackson in this lineup, and since I have Lamar Jackson, that means I won't be having Patrick Mahomes, and I probably won't have any of the Chiefs pass-catching options, which I like the Chiefs a lot. They have one of the highest totals on the slate, and it's going to be a very high-scoring game, and I want exposure to that game somehow. And if I don't have the passing attack, I should probably get the rushing attack just to try to soak up some points here. And Daryl Williams definitely filled in nicely for Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week. Had 21 carries, had 2 rushing touchdowns, also 4 targets, played on like 87% of the snaps. So easily clear RB1 on a team that's a favorite. They have a high implied team total, and this is the best scoring environment on the entire slate. So I think it just makes sense to plug in Daryl Williams as for right now. I don't think he's like a cash game lock or anything, but just for the way this lineup's going to go, I think Williams does slide in nicely there. And since I kind of already hinted at it, let's just plug in Lamar Jackson here at the quarterback position. Obviously, if you don't play Patrick Mahomes, no problem with that whatsoever. Tennessee is a terrible pass defense, and it's probably the way they're going to attack them the most. But since I have Daryl Williams in my lineup, I'm going to bypass Patrick Mahomes here. Plus, Lamar Jackson's at a $1,000 discount, and I just think he ran as bad as possible last week, luck-wise. Like, he had 1 passing touchdown. He had a guy get tackled at the 1. And they had 3 rushing touchdowns from Latavius Murray, who is not playing this week, I should add, and Le'Veon Bell and Devonta Freeman also found the end zone. So I can't really expect that to happen again. We should be pushing for 200-plus passing yards, hopefully multiple passing touchdowns, and I'd say anywhere from like 60 to 90 rushing yards on the ground, which I would take that all day from the quarterback position. He's just too cheap. My projections like him as one of the best point per dollar options on the entire slate at the quarterback position. So even though he busted last week, I'll be more than happy to go back to Lamar and just bake in that high rushing floor that he offers you each and every single week. He's not going to throw the ball like Patrick Mahomes, but he doesn't need to just because of that ability he has on the ground. So we're going to plug in Lamar, and we'll move on to the wide receiver position. And this is where tough decisions need to be made because you can spend up for one of these studs. Like, it's possible in this lineup. Like, let's just say we threw in Davante Adams here, $8,900. That would mean $42.60 per player, which is definitely possible once you factor in a cheap defense and probably a cheap wide receiver or two. But I'm not sure if I'm going to go the stud route or not because we can go pretty balanced to make a good-looking lineup. I think there's multiple ways we can go. Maybe we can try to play around with this at the end. Cooper Kupp's in a great spot versus Detroit. I already have Darrell Henderson, though, but the thing is they have a team total of like 33 this week, so I'm really too concerned about having multiple Rams in my lineup. I think it's just fine. He hasn't had a game below double-digit targets yet this year. 10, 11, 12, 13, 10, and 12, and he's been killing it each and every single week. And there's no one in Detroit that can guard him. This offense is going to put up a ton of points, and he's also the cheapest of the stud group. That's what we want to call it this weekend. So I feel like people are going to lean Cooper Kupp and Davante Adams. He gets the team that are allowing the second most points per game to the wide receiver position. Tyreek Hill gets the team that's allowing the most points per game to the wide receiver position. So you really can't go wrong with either of these three. They're probably all going to smash. You just got to hope the one doesn't get like 45 and the others don't just get 20 because then you're going to be left behind a little bit. But just for this lineup, not saying these guys aren't good plays, but I would love to get one of them in my lineup. If I can make that work this weekend, I will certainly go that route. But the guy we're going to plug in first, Calvin Ridley here versus Miami. They have not had a good defense so far this season, whether it be through the air or on the ground. And hard not to like him. He's going to get plenty of volume. He missed last week, but had a couple weeks off, so he's going to be good to go, nice and fresh. 8, 10, 11, 13 targets this year. It hasn't been like pretty, 10, 19, 14, 15 points, but it's not terrible. And $6,600 is the lowest price tag we've seen all year. He's been at 79, 75, and then 7K flat in weeks 3 and 4. So we're kind of getting a nice buy low spot in Calvin Ridley. I'm projecting him for some pretty high ownership this weekend, but I think it makes sense at $6,600 for the volume we should get, the talent he has, and I mean, there's really not many other places to go in this offense besides Kyle Pitts through the air and I guess a little bit of Cordell Patterson. But Calvin Ridley, $6,600 is looking mighty fine, and he fits our lineups nicely, and he just kind of starts our nice, well-balanced looking lineup. So we still have $4,700 left per play if we plug him in, compared to like $4,200 if we had Davante Adams. Not saying Adams is a bad player or anything, just the way this lineup is going to go, I think it makes sense to go with Calvin Ridley as the wide receiver 1. And then since we have Lamar Jackson, a guy I'm really looking at this week is Rashad Bateman at only $3,400. I'm thinking his ownership has been climbing throughout the week. At least that's what my ownership projections have been saying. I had him pretty low early on, but later in the week, to fit in some of these really good plays in the slate, you're going to have to dive down low a little bit. And since a lot of people are playing Lamar Jackson, I think him and Patrick Mahomes will be the 2 highest owned quarterbacks. People will like to get a pass catching option with their quarterback, and Rashad Bateman is dirt cheap here at $3,400. There's no Sammy Watkins this weekend. He had 6 targets, 4 catches last week. It wasn't anything special. Had his longest catch of 11 yards, but that's not bad for your debut, and you have to expect everything's going to get ramped up a little bit. So I actually don't hate Bateman here at $3,400. Bengals defense is not amazing or anything. They've actually been kind of stingy versus the pass this year, but I mean, I think Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore offense should be just fine, put up a lot of points. So Rashad Bateman, $3,400. He's a nice cheap pairing option with Lamar Jackson, and he just makes things work a little bit in our lineup because now we have over $5,000 left per player. And for the last wide receiver in this lineup, the mid-range is actually kind of cluttered with some pretty solid plays. Like you have Marquise Brown, Sterling Shepard if he's good to go, Jalen Waddle's in a good spot versus Atlanta, Devonta Smith, Henry Ruggs. Like there's some just decent plays here. Jacoby Myers, Brandon Cooks, Jamar Chase. If you are playing tournaments, I'm not going to do this in cash games. If you're playing tournaments, Lamar Jackson, Rashad Bateman, running back with Jamar Chase. That's actually not a bad GPP build there. A.J. Brown, he's been dealing with some, I guess, I don't know, batch of Chipotle or whatever it may be. But he said he's going to be good to go for Sunday, and it's a great spot versus KC, just one of the worst defenses in football. Julio Jones is banged up, but it sounds like he's going to be good to go. But, have to see on Julio because that's always a big question mark. But that one, A.J. Brown, Robert Woods is pretty good at $6,400. But the guy I like quite a bit, Chris Godwin here at $5,900 just seems way too cheap. And even if Antonio Brown was playing, I thought he was too cheap. My projections still liked him, but with Antonio Brown out, it's hard not to like Chris Godwin at only $5,900. The ball's going to go somewhere. When you take AB out the field, it's obviously a big hit to the offense. Well, not really a huge hit to the offense, but just a huge hit to the target share. So it's going to get bolted around everywhere else. So Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, massive bumps in this game. And Chris Godwin's just one of the safest options in this offense. They didn't have a great game versus Philly, only 43 yards and 9.3 fantasy points, but we know he's capable of having a big role in the offense. And again, with no AB taking him out of the equation, it's definitely a big bump for him. So $5,900. It's a pretty solid matchup here for Chicago. They kind of shut down Devontae Adams last week, and by shut down, I mean like 90 receiving yards, but they didn't have a blow-up game or anything, but this offense has just been cooking. I mean, I think they have a team total close to 30 points here, so $1,500, really hard not to like Chris Godwin at his price point. You can obviously go with Mike Evans, but he just always feels like he's a 40 or 5-point kind of guy, which does not feel that great in cash games. So if we go that route, we now have just under $4,000 left per player. We can plug in the chalk defense of the week. I think there's a couple good defenses. The Eagles, if you need a punt option at $2,300, you could use the Ravens versus Cincy, but since I have Lamar Jackson or Rashad Bateman, I'm kind of hoping the Cincinnati team puts up some points so these guys can keep throwing. The Cardinals defense is going to be the chalk. Patriots versus the Jets are viable, and the Rams are obviously in a good spot versus Detroit, but if you're paying $5K for a defense, I just think you're doing it wrong. Maybe they score defensive touchdowns and it works out, but I would take my chances that does not happen. But the Cardinals, 16-point favorites at home, only a 15.5-point implied team total against them. They actually haven't been terrible this year defensively in terms of fantasy points per game. 16, one was gross, then 18, 5, 8, and 12. Now they face Houston. Hard not to like them at $3,100. I'm honestly kind of surprised they're like around $4,000. I think DraftKings kind of messed up the pricing there. So now at this point, we have $5,600 left for our last couple of spots. Now there's a couple ways we could go. If we wanted to go super expensive at tight end, that would leave us $3,600 for the less spot. If you wanted to just throw in Travis Kelce, just get a piece of the passing attack for the Chiefs, you'd have to use like a cheap wide receiver here, so maybe like a Van Jefferson, but we already have Darrell Henderson, so that means we'd have a running back and wide receiver, or tight end, whatever you want to call it, for the Chiefs, and we'd have a running back and wide receiver from the Rams, which does not feel the greatest in cash games, so I'm probably not going to go Travis Kelce here. But the cheap tight end, I just want to keep going back to Ricky Seals-Jones. He's basically a wide receiver, and he's only $3,700, and he gets plenty of targets, plays the majority of the snaps, ran like 90% of the routes. Once again, he lines up over half the time in the slot, had a nice 39-yard receiving touchdown last week, 15, 9 points the past 2 weeks, just being the main guy here, 9 and 6 targets, 15 total. Really hard not to like Ricky Seals-Jones, plus Washington should be playing from behind here versus Green Bay. I believe they're 8 or 9-point dogs on the road, so should be plenty of volume for Ricky Seals-Jones once again. $3,700. Realize the price keeps rising, but I just don't feel like it's expensive enough. Should probably be around $5,000, and the fact that he's not still seems like a pretty good value to me. So that means for the flex, we'd have $7,500 left for our last spot, which we are just missing out on Travis Kelce. I'm not really wanting to go double tight end, but Travis Kelce is basically a wide receiver out there, so I wouldn't mind that. Cooper Kupp, we're about $900 short. I mean, you can play around with it. Maybe if you drop from the Cardinals defense to the Eagles, that would give you some more wiggle room. Actually, I would see how much it gives us total. So if we went that route, that leaves us $8,300 left, which means we're $100 off of Cooper Kupp. But we could probably finagle with a couple things to fit that in if you really wanted to on the slate. But I want to keep the Cardinals in for right now. And $7,500 left leaves us with Aaron Jones, who's an 8-point favorite at home, and he's relatively safe. He doesn't get quite Derrick Henry volume, but 17, 19, 15, 14, 13 carries the past 5 weeks. 4, 5, 4, 2, 6 targets, 21, 17, 11, 17, 41 fantasy points. I actually don't hate that as our last fit. Like Lamar Jackson, Daryl Henderson, Daryl Williams. I like all those guys quite a bit. Calvin Ridley, Rashad Bateman, Chris Godwin, Ricky Seals-Jones, Aaron Jones, and the Cardinals defense. Actually looks like a pretty darn good lineup. Uses all your salary. And I could actually see that working out for cash games. Is it maybe my favorite lineup out there? I'm not sure. I could probably optimize some better lineups maybe to fit in a stud, but I actually don't hate that as a more mid-range balanced lineup. Now, the scary thing here is you don't have Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, or Tyreek Hill, and I feel like you'd want one of those guys. So if we try to go that route, then probably the easiest that we can do is to find some extra salary to fit in one of those studs is probably just drop from the Cardinals defense to the Eagles defense. Yes, I know the Cardinals would be the chocolate defense, but the separation in fantasy points projection-wise from each defense is really nothing too massive. So just for this example here, that gives us nearly $1,000 extra, which It's close to a Cooper Kupp. We're $100 off, which kind of sucks. But if you wanted to fit in Cooper Kupp at the flex spot, you could always make a guy like Chris Godwin. You could turn him into like a Sterling Shepard if he happens to play. You have a Marquise Brown, but we already have Bateman, so I don't want to go too Ravens wide receivers in cash games because they're just passing volume isn't that high enough to, I think, warrant that. Jalen Waddle, $5,600. That's not terrible. I don't think that's a bad looking lineup, really. And even then, if you wanted to upgrade from Cooper Kupp, I'm not really sure if it's an upgrade by any means, but you could go with Tyreek Hill in the flex spot. That just leaves you some extra money to play around with. But a couple ways you can go this weekend, and you don't even have to go with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. You can go with Patrick Mahomes and pretty much build whatever the heck you want. I'm just showing you guys an example of a process I use to build a cash game lineup there, and you guys can apply it to your own favorite plays and make your own lineups this weekend. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And since it's October 23rd, near the end of the month, if you do want to sign up and you stay signed up on November 1st, I'll be more than happy to refund this last week for you so you can get it for free. If you want to check it out and try out all the extra content I do have posted over on the Patreon, I think you will enjoy it if you guys do like the free content here over on YouTube. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can get a free money bonus, instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I'll see you guys later tonight for the Core Plays video.